Hello everyone, welcome back to the Open View TV. We are going to continue with chapter 1 of Daniel, and now we're going to begin with verse number 3. Now remember, last time we looked at verses number 1 and 2, and we came to the conclusion that yes, they were taken captive because Israel was doing the same wicked things that God had told them that they were, for the same reason that God had driven those other nations out of that land. And now we know that because they were doing that same thing that God has told them not to do, then they were taken captive to Babylon. And we know, even in today's time, you don't have to be doing wicked things to be taken captive or to be invaded by a different nation, because sometimes it might be because you have gold, uranium, oil, and some other nations that, you know what, I really want their oil, so let me invade them. This can happen, or it could be because a big and catastrophic earthquake happened and destroys many parts of the country, and now you have to leave to go to a different location to live your life. So that happens. But we know in this case, it wasn't because of any of that, but it was because Israel was doing the same wickedness that those other nations that were driven out were doing. Now, verse number 3, and let's see what the Bible has to say. Then the king instructed Ashpenaz, the master of the eunuch, to bring some of the children of Israel and some of the king's descendants and some of the nobles, young men in whom there was no blemish, but good looking, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge and quick to understand, who had ability to serve in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the language and literature of the Chaldeans. Basically, somebody like me. Now, okay, I'm just kidding. But as we can see that they weren't looking for the ugly looking men and women. They weren't looking for the feeble people. And I think when the Bible says, when it says blemish, without blemish, it doesn't mean characterize, more likely character type, because you wouldn't know their character until you spend time with them. But anybody who had any deformity, I would say, either missing a hand, missing a foot, not mentally stable, things of that nature. And we can see here that word for blemish, it means without defect. Without defect. So, and it goes to say, although found only late, is apparently original form of physical defect, figuratively moral stain. Now, if you talk about like morality and character, then yes, but mostly it's going to be a physical attribute. So when the Bible said with that they were looking for the people without blemish, meaning they had to be good looking. Basically, if you were ugly looking, that would be called a blemish. So unfortunately, that's how it is. And he continues to say this, and he goes on and says the Bible that they wanted those men who were gifted in wisdom, possessing knowledge and quick to understand. So basically, they wanted to teach these men the way that the Chaldeans lived, their literature, their history, how they teach, what they learn. So the way of life of the Chaldeans was Ashpenaz's, I would say, duties into teaching those young people that were brought captive. And they weren't looking for anybody. Remember, they were looking for mostly nobles and king's descent. So that tells you who they were looking to teach the ways of the Chaldeans. Moving on to verse number 6, up to verse number 5. And the king appointed for them a daily provision of the king's delicacies and of the wine which he drank, and 3 years of training for them, so that at the end of that time they might serve the king. So, what we get here is we have an idea what they wanted to do. You are captive in the foreign land, you need to serve. Just as many people were captive from Africa and they were taken as slaves to other nations, they had to serve. Right? Only difference is at that time they wouldn't want to teach you how to read or write, but them, the Chaldeans, they wanted them to understand and to know the literature. So they had to learn to read the language, they had to learn the alphabet, they had to learn how to write the language, how to communicate with the language. Not just serve as slaves, but to learn so that they can serve the king in the purpose that he has. Moving on, we also see as we continue that they were to teach or to learn the language, right? The tongue of the Chaldeans. And in verse number 5, they were also given delicacies and the wine which he drank and the training. So, what does that tell us? It basically means the food that the king would eat, they were to partake in that same food, which is very interesting because remember that Jesus came to eat the food that we ate on this earth. He left heaven and came on this earth to live with us so we can learn the language of heaven. In a sense, Jesus was taken captive to earth, not literally but in a physical different way of thinking, figuratively. He was taken captive to earth to learn the language, to learn our food, to learn our culture, interestingly enough, but at the same time, he also came to teach us the culture of heaven, the food of heaven, the language of heaven. Isn't that interesting? So, Nebuchadnezzar had the food he was eating, he also gave them to eat. God, in the form of Jesus Christ, came on this earth to give us the food from heaven. Just like he gave the Israelites food from heaven that the angels were eating, he gave to them in the desert, in the wilderness. Jesus came himself to give us the food from heaven, at the same time partaking from our food that he actually made. Isn't that interesting? Now, as we continue, let's see what else on your screen. Bible says in verse number 6, now from those of the sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. To them the chief of the eunuchs gave name. He gave them Daniel the Belshazzar. He gave Daniel the name Belteshazzar. To Hananiah, Shadrach, Mishael, Meshach, Azariah, Abednego. What is the first thing that they did? They changed their names. After they been captive, they changed their names. Why? Well, as we know, your name means something. Remember that when God was speaking with Jacob, God said to Jacob, your name will no longer be Jacob but Israel. Because why? You fought with God and you prevailed. Your name means something. And there, in that verse, the first thing they did was they changed their name. Why? That way they can forget about their identity. And you're going to see Many people sometimes they move to a different country and they were given a different name. Some would say, well, my such and such name from my country is this, and my American name is this. Why is that? To change your identity. When you change your name, you forget the old you. That's the plan, is to make you forget the old you and embrace the new you. But as we're going to see in the next verse, next time we meet, that wasn't the case for those four Hebrew boys. For Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, it wasn't the case for them. But I'm going to leave you with this. They were taken captive to learn the language, the literature, the tongue, and the food of the Chaldeans. But Jesus came to our world, taken captive to our world, to eat our food, to teach us heaven's language, heaven's practice, heaven's literature, heaven's history, and heaven's food. Isn't that interesting? Yes, it is interesting. This is very interesting that God came to show us the ways of heaven. Guys, I'm going to stop it right here. We're going to continue next time we see from verse number 8. Until then, this was the Omega TV. I hope you have a blessed rest of the day with Jesus Christ. Until then, bye for now.